Good afternoon and welcome to the home stretch. So that introduction was very nice, but I'm going to pivot because I'm here today speaking not on behalf of the American Chemistry Council, but to talk about a collaboration, and actually a couple of collaborations that are occurring within the plastics industry value chains and also within the plastics industries globally. And your collaborations we're really excited about because we are finding new ways to work with our customers downstream and with our partners across several different supply chains to really demonstrate how plastic can provide sustainable solutions to society and as well as to our customers. So the theme of the discussion today is collaborations on improving sustainability. And that's within a new organization called the World Plastics Council. So plastic resin producers exist all over the world, right? And they have trade associations and business groups where they talk to each other, mostly within our own geographies. Recently, we began to realize that many of both the threats and the opportunities that are existing for the plastics industry are existing globally, and therefore it made sense for us to find a way to address those issues and opportunities in a global manner. And so the World Plastics Council was formed after initial discussions in 2013, and then building on those in 2014, we agreed to form at the end of 2014. And in 2015, we launched our first programs and held our second General Assembly. And this year, 2016, is all about finding ways to engage on issues. So that the mission of this new group, the World Plastics Council, is to be the global forum for the CEOs of these companies to provide leadership, to accelerate cooperation, and drive improved outcomes that benefit not just the industry, but also consumers and society. Importantly, this is a commitment of CEOs. It's not the trade associations. This is a bit different because it's the CEO who has the ability to really drive change through the company. And my colleague from Europe, Carl Forster, and I sat this morning with the CEOs, and again, we're sort of impressed by the degree of commitment that they're bringing to driving change, and we'll talk about some of those areas in a moment. The companies that are participating in this work are shown here. There are 17 of them, and the thing that I would do at the moment, by the way, we're still growing, this is early days in this group, the thing that I would note about this is that these represent plastic producers from almost all regions of the world. The Americas, Europe, the Arabian Gulf, and increasingly now in Asia. And I would notably point to the one in the middle, CPCIF, the Chinese Petrochemical and Chemical Industry Federation, which represents the state-owned enterprises in China, which is a really important step because China, as you probably know, as a region, is one of the largest producers of plastic in the world, and China exports its products all over the world. So as a very important player in our industry, we're very honored and privileged to have the CPCIF join us in this work. So as a starting matter, of course, as the plastic producers, we love plastic, right? So plastics deliver incredible benefits when used in key end-use markets. And in the automotive markets, plastics make cars lighter, improving fuel efficiency and reducing emissions while not sacrificing a bit of safety in packaging. Plastics reduce the material required to get food and other materials safely from the place of manufacture to the consumer with less breakage, and therefore they represent a very efficient means of moving materials. In the building and construction space, plastics in insulation reduce energy utilization and therefore reduce CO2 emissions, but also help deliver safe, clean drinking water through plastic pipes to places where otherwise you may not have access to clean water. So the potential for plastics are fantastic, but if not properly managed after they're used, plastics become litter or worse, end up in our oceans. And none of us, not society, not the brand owners, certainly not the basic material manufacturers, want to see this as an outcome. So we're committed and aligned on avoiding this outcome. And this is important because as recent studies have indicated, up to 8 million metric tons of plastics a year are currently entering the ocean as a result of mismanaged or poorly managed waste on land. You may have heard this before. Of course, it's not litter that's falling off a boat. It's not blowing off of the beaches. These are as a result of our failure to manage the materials of consumer society on land. And if not managed, when it rains, these materials find their way down streams, down rivers, and ultimately into the ocean. It's important because the rate at which this problem is increasing is significant. If not addressed through on-land interventions, the amount of plastic in the ocean by 2025 could equal 1 ton of plastic per every 3 tons of fish. That's an extraordinary outcome, again, that nobody wants to see. So that brings us to what we can do as plastic manufacturers from our unique perspective in the value chain. That's what caused the World Plastics Council to come together. We realized that we're one actor, we're not the only actor, we can't solve this, but what we can do is contribute our unique skill sets, our value chain leverage, and our passion to collaborate, to create collaborations that will in fact improve outcomes. So, for example, on our number one priority, improving the sustainability of plastics, and particularly on land waste management, we are working to reduce, reuse, and recycle as much as possible. Our polymer chemists have some of the most creative ideas going on how to improve recyclability, whether it's through improving the design of materials, material sortation and processing technologies, or simply through the deployment of technology and capacity building. We are working to expand the recycling of plastics in the economies where we're working. Increasingly, that also means looking for solutions today for plastics that cannot be, for whatever reason, recycled, whether it's a technology barrier, an economic barrier, a practical barrier. There's still a large number of plastics, sometimes composite materials, sometimes more complexly layered films, that don't have markets. And so what are we going to do for those plastics? Well, landfill is one option. Litter is certainly not an option. And so what kinds of energy recovery technologies might there be so that we capture the energy content of the plastic before it's wasted? As we were thinking about what our contributions might be and how we could work together, we came across an organization called the Ocean Conservancy, and it's the largest oceans NGO in the United States. So, among other things, the Ocean Conservancy operates the International Coastal Cleanup, and for the past 25 years they've been monitoring what goes on beaches and at the edge of rivers and recording what's there. And over time they've recorded changes of what was primarily glass or paper or metal 25 years ago is increasingly plastic. And they were interested in finding partners in the private sector to help them collaborate to identify, finance, and implement systems which would manage municipal solid waste better on land so that it doesn't become marine debris. Good news for us, they were looking for partners at the same time that we were also looking for partners, and so a collaboration was born that today has resulted in something called the Trash-Free Seas Alliance. And I just want to pause for a second to let you consider the economic power of the kinds of organizations that are represented here. There are material manufacturers, plastic converters, NGOs, large retailers, consumer good companies, academics, and aquarium managers, Bank of America. These are large organizations that have all come together and said, we each have a place in this issue. We have a technology, or we have a position in a supply chain, or a geographic specialty that we can bring to bear to begin to make a difference in the marine debris space. So as an alliance, what have we done? Well, first, the alliance sponsored scientific research to begin to identify why it is that so much plastic is entering the ocean and where it's coming from. And that research began to point to emerging economies that have large populations living within 100 kilometers of a coastline or a major river that have access to consumer goods, and where the economy is not yet invested systematically in waste management infrastructure. This is not rocket science. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that this is where most plastic is entering the ocean. So a team of academics from the University of Georgia began to model this information and pointed to sort of a range of countries located primarily in Southeast Asia, but not exclusively. And they were the first to say that this country mix is going to change over time as consumerism grows, for example, in Africa and in other parts of the Gulf area. We are likely to see exactly the same kind of challenges that are being experienced today in Southeast Asia. So the first thing that the Alliance did was sponsor the research. The second thing it did was to hire the McKinsey organization to evaluate a range of interventions that could take place that would be most effective at managing the most amount of plastic inputs into the ocean with the least resources. And the results of that work came out in a report released earlier this year called Stemming the Tide, Strategies for a Plastic-Free Ocean. And that report is now publicly available, and we're very excited about where that will lead going forward. Just as it's a 150-page report, so it's beyond the scope of a 25-minute presentation to tell you too much about it. But at a high level, there are three things that need to happen to address this problem. First is to accelerate the development of waste management, and that means both raising collection rates on land and reducing the cost of collection, and secondly, to incubate and then pilot waste management systems that involve collection, processing, and management of the waste, and to do that in a way that's as economically sustainable as possible, meaning that we need to design systems so that they can recover the most value for what they're processing. So, for example, composting as much as possible, mechanically recycling, and then doing energy recovery treatment for portions of the waste stream that can't be economically mechanically recycled. And then the third sphere, and this is really important, is we need to begin to re-engineer plastic from the beginning, from the first steps, and to consider the life cycle impacts of plastics through innovation. And this is the really exciting part. Now, the Trash-Free Seas Alliance has defined out from their scope, this is not what they're going to work on. And while it's important, and it's absolutely essential, the analogy that they were using is if your basement is flooding because you have a broken pipe, you shouldn't just bail. You have to actually turn the water off so the basement doesn't continue to fill. And so the strategy of the Alliance is to focus their resources on the first two, stemming the tide, keeping the plastic input into the ocean, and turning that off. And then over time, we can design plastics which will be ultimately more sustainable so that we don't have to develop and implement the kinds of waste management infrastructure that is frankly is extremely expensive and hard to implement once consumer products are already in commerce. So what's next? We're really excited to move into phase 2 now, and that's designing and implementing the waste management systems in the Asia-Pacific region. We have 2 pilot projects ongoing now, one in the Philippines and one in Indonesia, where we have gone in and really worked to understand what, at a local level, what the waste stream exists and what kind of system could be designed to most economically capture the value of the waste. So that's part 1. Part 2 is to invite in the multilateral funding organizations, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and the kinds of funders who will actually be required to make the investment, and to have those folks meet with the mayors, the local leaders who need the investment, and to begin to understand how they can de-risk the investment. What kind of investment climate requirements are required for the lenders to be able to invest in waste management infrastructure. So we're really excited to see, and that's this summer, where that's going to lead. And hopefully we can begin to take those 2 pilot projects, turn them into 20, into 200, and really begin to see the kind of impact that we need at scale. So that's one area where the plastics industry is collaborating, and that really has been sort of an external suite of collaborations. I want to talk for a second and change gears and talk about how we are working within our own industry and collaborating within our value chains. I'm here on behalf of the World Plastics Council. We are the plastic and resin makers. But around the world, there are also plastic converters, the companies that take the pellets and make them into shape things. And so 6, approaching 7 years ago, the United Nations and the U.S. Oceans Agency collaborated on a conference to begin to raise awareness for marine debris. And our industry came together and said, well, we don't have the solutions, but what we do have is the will to work together. And we said, we don't know what this is going to lead to, but we, on behalf of, we the resin makers, on behalf of our customers, the converters, we will commit to work in 6 different areas to do what we can to address this, and hopefully through semi-annually reporting transparently on what it is we're doing. That transparency will help us grow commitments that we will agree to work globally. From that humble beginning, we now have work ongoing by 60 different trade associations across 34 countries, and that declaration content includes companies or associations that commit to work in 1 or more of 6 areas, and that includes partnerships to prevent marine debris, research to better understand the origin, scope, and impacts of marine debris, enforcement of existing laws, spreading knowledge on efficient waste management technologies, enhancing the recycling and energy recovery of plastics, and then perhaps almost most importantly, the one thing that we can control within our own system, better stewarding plastic pellets from our manufacturing to our customer sites to make sure that those pellets don't escape and become marine litter. So I'm going to give you a few examples of the kinds of collaborations that have resulted from that initial commitment. The first is research. Our organizations have underwritten a significant amount, a body of research undertaken by the United Nations to understand the fate and effects of microplastics in the marine environment. Some of those enter the environment in small size, others become microplastics through wave action and sunlight and breakdown. So they were particles to begin with, and over time have become microplastics. So we want to better understand how that's happened, and we work with the United Nations to do that. And other collaborations have taken the form of promoting recycling and energy recovery. Now, of course, recycling is the number one. Reducing is number one, but within the recycling, that's something we can do. That would be the number one priority. But where you can't, our organizations have worked to better understand the range of technologies available to treat non-recyclable plastics, and those can include engineered solid fuels. So, for example, a lot of the plastics that run through a MRF line that don't make it into a bale, that would otherwise be destined to landfill, can be aggregated, repurposed, turned into pellets and sold as fuel, primarily for use in cement fields. So it's avoiding landfilling of the uneconomically recyclable plastics. There's gasification, pyrolysis, and other technologies that can turn plastics back into their chemical constituents or into a diesel fuel or a synthetic gas through pyrolysis. And then, of course, obviously landfill, there is a place for it, but it is not a preferred outcome. Another area where we've been collaborating has been through the spread of knowledge, and we helped write a report on best management practices for the prevention of marine litter, and have worked with the United Nations Environment Assembly on that, and that report will be launched next month at the UNIA 2 event in Nairobi. And one of the last examples I want to talk about is really a very cool initiative that was launched by our colleagues in the Arabian Gulf. The Gulf Petrochemical and Chemical Association 4 years ago started something called Waste-Free Environment. And one day a year, the GPCA member companies throughout the Gulf have their families and their kids go to a predetermined place and do beach cleanups. And this was a very simple cleanup idea that was for that region a very unique undertaking. It hadn't really happened there before. And today, just a few years later, this beach cleanup has turned into a scientific research opportunity that has over 10,000 participants across 10 GCC economies. doing something that really hadn't been done before in that part of the world. So beginning to make the connection between the plastic companies, their families, and their family commitments to a cleaner environment is something that has really been fun to watch. And then the final example on collaborations has been on the area of pellet containment. Our industry launched something called Operation Clean Sweep, which is a code of best management practices for plastic producers to commit to follow, to teach their employees what to do if there's a spill of pellets, how to keep plastic manufacturing systems that perhaps blow pellets through lines if some are spilled or don't make the containers that they're destined for, how to clean them up properly. And we have asked throughout our trade associations around the world to sign their companies up to this code of best management practices. So we're making progress on this global declaration. Over the past 4 years, since then, we do the report every other year. We've grown from 47 trade associations now to 64 different trade associations, from 27 countries now to 35. And the report that we'll release next month, we believe we're now at about 260 local projects involving members of our industry trying to make a difference through collaboration. So I'm not here to say that we have nailed it. We are only attempting to do our part in trying to show that through collaboration, either within our value chains, our customers, or with our government partners, that we can be part of making a difference. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. I appreciate that very much, and thank you, Doug, for this event generally.
Steve, thank you, and thanks again for your support for Plasticity this year and the World Plastic Council. Does anyone have a question for Steve? They're doing a lot of projects. We've done some good work with them. Together we can always get in space. So, nothing? Okay, thank you very much.